Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dan Lanning, the Oregon Ducks, one of my off-season teams, kicking off spring practice the month of March. Want to talk about a few storylines, a few questions that I'm going to be following as Oregon carries out spring practice until, when I say questions, I don't mean questions like we've been talking about like with these other Power 5 programs. I don't have many questions about this Oregon depth chart and any holes that they have. My questions are, what does Oregon need to do to kind of get to that national championship heading into 2024? Make no mistake about it, for me, when I look at this roster, this is championship or bust. I think that's the expectation Dan Lanning wants in Eugene going forward. Want to get into some of those things we're looking at for Oregon to take that next step heading into 2024. Really excited to get into this one. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys and the Oregon fans. You guys have been absolutely awesome with the support. You guys have shown, whether we're talking transfer portal, high school recruiting, position breakdowns, can't thank you guys enough for rocking with the fellas. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. More importantly, would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. The best part about doing this, talking ball, learning from you guys in the comment section. Dill, I'm going to give you the T-box here. Oregon heading into 2024. What are we looking for?
I mean, I'm echoing you. It's like you're not really worried about anything. You're just trying to see some position groups probably take it up a notch and get it to that championship level, because most of the team is that offensive line. Looks like it is that wide receiver group, that defensive back group. Those all look like they're kind of at that level that you need them to be to win championships. It's just about some of those other units that, again, really, really solid, going to great. That's kind of what you're looking for. And honestly, my first thing is the quarterback. I mean, that to me is like fascinating beyond belief, because you have a guy in Dante Moore who's come in, and I think it's almost presumed that he doesn't really have a chance to be the starting quarterback. It's going to be Dillon Gabriel. I mean, Dante Moore, yeah, he had his struggles as a freshman. He was thrown into the fire on a team that wasn't very good, with an offensive line that wasn't very good, without a ton of weapons. And there were some bad moments. But again, there's a gear that he has that Dillon Gabriel just simply can't reach. If I heard something coming out of spring camp that was like, "Ooh, we like what Dante Moore is doing. This is a battle." I mean, that would tickle me if I'm an Oregon fan.
And I'm not going to go as far and call it a quarterback battle. One, I would love to hear from the Oregon fans, because I read the message boards. I'm on Twitter. I see some Oregon fans really high on Dante Moore and potentially being a starter in 2024. Now, I look at it like they brought Dillon Gabriel to be the guy in 2024, and then for Dante Moore to be the guy in 2025. Now, Dill, we're going to do a deep dive on Dante Moore a little later this week, I should say, going into some film, talking about what's special about Dante Moore, because I think you said it right. You talk about which Oregon offense has a higher ceiling in 2024, the one where Dante Moore is your starting quarterback, or the one that Dillon Gabriel is in. The answer is Dante Moore. Now, the reason I'm leaning Dillon Gabriel pretty strongly is you don't need a turbulent quarterback play in 2024 to have one of the best offenses in the country, right? When you have guys like Evan Stewart, Tez Johnson, Trayshawn Holden, a run game that's going to be like how good Oregon's is, the offensive line, you need a guy that's going to be the point guard of this offense. And Dillon Gabriel, one of the most productive, experienced quarterbacks that we've seen in college football, I trust him more to operate that offense. And I'm kind of adding on to that. I think Dillon Gabriel perfectly fits what Will Stein wants to do in terms of processing quickly, getting the football out quickly to your guys in space. Bo Nix, his average depth of target was only 6.4 yards during last year, right? How did this Oregon offense hit all the explosive plays they did? By getting the ball out on time, letting guys go after the catch. I think Dillon Gabriel is probably best suited to do that. But Dante Moore is extremely, extremely intriguing. Now, the next question kind of coinciding here is the wide receiver shakeout room, right? Like a wide receiver shakeout room. I'm interested in what the wide receiver room shakes out to be in 2024. Now, how I look at it, I think you got three kind of bona fide locks, right? Evan Stewart, Tez Johnson, that might make up the best wide receiver duo that you see in college football heading into 2024. Now, guy that's flying under the radar that I will bang the table for until September comes and we're kicking off is Trayshawn Holden. A guy that didn't get a ton of opportunity last year because guys like Troy Franklin and Tez Johnson were featured. A guy that has a ton of juice. I'm looking at this star wide receiver group and saying this is one of the better units we see in the country.
Yeah, and I mean, it's going to be really tough to unseat those top three, because I think it's not only that they're all really talented and have already proven to be very good players, but it's also a really well-balanced unit. I mean, you got Tez Johnson, who works the middle of the field, works that underneath portion of the field really, really well, does a good job getting or had a lot of chemistry with Bo Nix. Hopefully you have that with the starters now. And then you obviously got Evan Stewart. He really does a good job being like that true number one alpha dog that Troy Franklin was. Can get over the top, can run really good routes, can make plays with the ball in his hands. He's just perfect. And then you got another guy in Trayshawn Holden, just a big physical, really prototypical number two. I almost see it.
And the most wild part is you're talking about guys like Gary Bryant, Jurion Dickey, like maybe not even getting that much playing time, where they're probably starting on almost every other Power 5 program across the country now. Apologies.
Because what roles don't those top three fill? I mean, they're all really good. They balance each other out, and they're all really, really good. It's just really hard.
And especially when you have the tight end room like Oregon does with Terrence Ferguson and a guy in Kenny Sadiq, who, if you guys listen to my breakout players, I am extremely high on what Kenny Sadiq brings to the table. It's going to be really hard to find playing time. And going back to the quarterback room, like that's exactly how Dan Lanning wants it. He wants competition. He came from Kirby Smart. You got to compete if you want to play for this Oregon Ducks team. Moving on to the defensive side of the football, because by the way, apologies. I had the defensive depth chart up while we were talking about the offense. Dill, I don't have any questions about the offensive line, which I think is special because we're doing all these deep dives. And I got questions about almost every single offensive line at the Power 5 level.
At least a position, right? Do they have a right tackler? Do they have a left guard? Oregon's got everything.
It's about as solid as it gets on the offensive side of the football. Now, switching over to the defense, this is where I really do think I want to see Oregon take that step, and that is on the defensive line, right? You take a look at maybe that one position group that wasn't national championship caliber in 2023. And again, when I say that, I'm putting the bar extremely high for this Oregon team. Right? That defensive line was solid. I don't think it was national championship caliber. You go back to the teams that have won national championships. Michigan, one of the best defensive lines in the country. The Georgia teams, some of the best defensive lines we've seen in the history of college football. Can Oregon unlock that? Because I look at this depth chart and say there are guys that can be NFL caliber guys, can be All-American guys. And I'm going to start with the guy that I don't normally mention as breakout candidate. I'm going to go Jordan Burch. This was a guy that was a 5-star coming out of high school, has all the power, all the talent in the world to be a premier edge rusher at the college level. He's a big body, likes to go speed to power, can collapse pockets. You look at this Oregon defensive line, and the number one thing I'm looking at is who is breaking out heading into 2024, who can be the difference maker for this Oregon defense.
And that's what you're just kind of looking for, the guy to rack up some sacks, because you look at Jordan Burch, look at Mateo Yu, both really physical, really disruptive, but they're not going to stuff the stat sheet unless Jordan Burch obviously translates more of that raw talent into being more proficient at winning his route. I mean, again, he does push back. He is very disruptive and good against the run, but he doesn't win in the way some of those high end pass rushers have seen. I mean, you've seen some things from guys like Amari Winston and Blake Purchase that make you think if they just continue on the path they're on, they kind of have that. They have that extra gear of athleticism, a little more fluidity, some of those traits you're looking for. But again, I think they need to find that one guy who just strikes fear in a tackle.
It's wild because I got a laundry list of guys, right? We talked about Jordan Burch, we talked about Mateo Yu, Blake Purchase, Winston. You have 5-star Elijah Rushing coming in. He'll be in spring ball. You have Aiden Breland on the inside. He'll be in for spring ball. I'm going to be listening for some of those guys on the inside as well, because you look at potentially some problems with the depth. Now, I think you significantly enhanced that, bringing in Jamari Caldwell from Houston. I think that was a massive get for Oregon. I thought it was a big position in need. Can Aiden Breland, can Zadavian Sims, can those guys be ready to play as freshmen? Can they be game wreckers for this Oregon team? Some other questions I have. Now, Dill, you threw this one in here. The next question moving on, the linebacker play, which again, kind of similar to with the conversation we had with this defensive line. Certainly wasn't bad in 2023, but you texted me, you think they can take a step in 2024?
I mean, Justin Jacobs is a guy who I feel like has kind of first-round talent in terms of what he is as a linebacker. And same with Jeffrey Bassa. Maybe not quite the ceiling that Justin Jacobs has just without the traits, but really athletic for both of them. I think you want to just see them play faster. I mean, you think about how the old Georgia linebackers played under Dan Lanning, like in Nakobe Dean, like Quay Walker, Channing Tindall. I mean, how those guys were exploding in the holes. They were making a lot of plays behind the line of scrimmage. I think that's what you're looking for from these Oregon linebackers. You just want to see more aggression. You want to see more like playing confident in yourself, where you're really you see it, you go to it quickly. I think that's kind of what I'm looking
And
for.
this might be a little bit of a 2-for-1 because if you get this defensive line taking that step, that only helps the linebacker play, right? If you have a defensive line, why were the Georgia linebackers so good under Dan Lanning's defense? It started with the defensive line dominating, keeping those guys clean, right? Standing on your double teams, letting linebackers get downhill. If that defensive line takes a step, I mean, I think you're going to see the linebackers take a step as well. Now, getting to we talked about the wide receiver room. That's insanely deep, right? We mentioned the running back room. That's insanely deep. I think the deepest position on this team is back in the secondary, specifically at that quarterback spot. I'm about to list off some names that I can't wait to hear what the competition looks like. Who is going to earn the starting reps for this Oregon defense in the back end at cornerback? Jabbar Muhammad, I think, is a bona fide starter for this Oregon team. I think he's one of the best cornerbacks that you see in the country. Competing on the other side of Jabbar Muhammad, Jaleel Florence, who played excellent in 2023. Dante Manning, who I thought played really well towards the end of the year for the Oregon Ducks. You have a youngster in Roderick Pleasant, who I think is going to be competing for sure. You bring in Cam Alexander. You have a guy in Ife Obadegu coming in as a true freshman that I think will be able to play as well. You talk about competition. You talk about depth at that cornerback spot. Absolutely loaded. I think the question is, how does the rest of the secondary shake out, right? That nickel back room. How I see it going, and I think what I'm focused on is how can you get the best players on the field, right? That's the real question when you want to have an elite college football team, when you have so many good guys on your defense. I thought Dan Lanning did a great job when he was at Georgia, getting the best players on the field. At nickel, I think you see Nico Reed and Brandon Johnson battle it out. And again, whoever wins that, you feel pretty good about. Now, the reason I say that is I think you see Tasheem Johnson move back to that safety spot. And if there's one position that you might be a little concerned about depth, it is that safety. And you have a guy in Tasheem Johnson who could play nickel, be a damn good nickel, might be the best nickel on this team. But I think he best serves maybe going back to that safety room with Kobe Savage for coming in from Kansas State. You look at how this secondary rounds out. I don't know how many secondaries you could say are better than the Oregon Ducks.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting you mentioned that because it did look like they were kind of playing with that personnel group for a fair amount of the year last year where Nico Reed was on the field at times, not on the field. I think they were trying to figure it out. Again, a fair amount of them are coming back. And then you add Kobe Savage, who, again, I think immediately becomes kind of what
he's the Evan Williams 2.0 of this defense, no doubt in my mind.
And they needed that because Evan Williams was super good for them and really valuable. So, again, to be able to replace him, they have the bones of what they need in the secondary. I think the cornerback play might be as good as anyone in the country with Jabbar Muhammad. It will be like, again, that safety room I thought played good for most of the year. That's another room I think that probably can take another step, especially adding Kobe Savage to replace Williams.
Yeah, I think Kobe Savage was a massive get. I'm kind of interested to see if they go out and grab another safety. Because again, what's been the pattern with Dan Lanning is if there's a position that you think you can add to make your team better, he's going to add it. Right? He doesn't really. He wants that competition. So I wonder. I think it starts with what the personnel looks like. Because I look at some of these cornerbacks and say, all right, can Dante Manning play some safety and cross train him there? Because again, you don't want a guy like Dante Manning not playing if he's one of your better players in the defensive back room. And so we'll see how that shakes out. It's a good problem to have, right? We're talking a lot of other Power 5 programs.
That is interesting. That's an interesting point to make because you can only play really 2 cornerbacks at once, and they probably have 4 that you're pretty comfortable with.
Yeah, maybe even more than that. If guys like Ife Obadegu or Dakota Fields come in and can play, it is an incredibly deep room. And if you want to get your best guys out, maybe you're cross-training a little bit. Michigan did a little bit of that last year with how loaded their secondary room was. That's where we'll cut it here. A lot of interesting storylines, but more importantly, like exciting storylines for the Oregon Ducks. There aren't concerns on this roster. This is more, all right, who's taking that step during spring practice? We'll monitor it as it shakes out. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Would love to hear from y'all in the comments section. And if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.